It's easy to get lost. This is The Revenue Maze, and I'm Valerie Cobb. Join me as we navigate the halls, dead ends, and U-turns on our path towards upward growth trajectory. The Revenue Maze is sponsored by Lodestar URY, guidance and execution through fractional revenue leadership, uncovering hidden revenue streams, and empowering small business growth through process-driven sales. Welcome everybody to the Revenue Maze. I have an exciting guest today. I really love this one. All right, so currently he's working with the Big Four, one of the Big Fours, for global consultancy to fund turnarounds and small businesses and other groups. And he worked for Kamar Group, which then brought him to kind of how he's getting today. He was part of the alliance with the Institute of Chartered Accountants. Ooh. And then that's where he got into the failing businesses and turning around. And right now he's currently doing some interesting stuff that we'll talk about more, but helping those small businesses in the sales and growth range. And so I would love for everybody to welcome Murray Wilkinson out of Scotland. Welcome, Murray.
Hi, Val. Great to see you.
It's good to see you too. Okay, now you know how this show has to go. We have to, first of all, talk about the Revenue Maze. And so what is one thing, Murray, that you could tell people that would help them get out of the Revenue Maze?
So I think what I've found, Val, with many businesses, and quite shockingly, lots of businesses haven't really invested in properly designing their sales system, and that's one of the things that I've been helping companies with here in the UK, because really, if they don't have a proper system, they can't practice, and then they have difficulty executing, and it's quite shocking that sales now is challenging. And of course, if you have a proper system, everything hangs off the back of that. So you can coach and train your staff, you can understand your buyer. If your salespeople understand your buyer, it gives them obviously an opportunity and an advantage to make sure they can deliver whatever it is they're looking to deliver, irrespective of your sector. So systems for me is the big thing, and it tends to be where we always start with SMEs over in the UK. Do you find that in the US, Val? Is it a similar issue?
Yes, I find that sometimes people go, well, why do I need that process? And how do I know your process is going to work? That's what I get. I get that question all the time.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
What's your guarantee?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, it really starts off with understanding what the client's buyer is looking for. And, there's lots of businesses who are very good at talking about what they do. But at the end of the day, it's not really about them, it's about their client. So typically what we'll start off doing is say, well, have you actually asked your clients why it is they engage with you? What made them at that moment where they actually said, yes, let's get on board with your company. What was it that made your client actually take that step? And it sounds simple. It is simple, but it's quite frightening, the number of businesses who don't properly survey their buyers. And it doesn't have to be really formal. It can be a case of just picking up the phone. And of course, once you understand why your buyer buys, it's a whole lot easier from there. Do you agree?
I do agree, because I always say, even on these shows, that one of the things that I always talk to sales teams about is, and it was from a mentor, so I can't say that I came up with it because I'm not that brilliant, but he always asked the question, why do people buy? And it always trips everybody up, but it's the simplest thing. Why do people buy? Their reasons. That's it. And if you don't know their reasons, you're done.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And it's quite interesting when you're in a consultancy position and you're going into a company as an outside looking in. It sounds like you've got the meaning of life, but it's not. It's basics. It's simple stuff. And organizations get caught up in their own thing, and they forget to actually consider what the customer's thinking. And I know in my experience with any of the companies I've been involved in, invariably what happens is once you've spoken to the client and found out what made them say, yes, I want to go ahead, it's not what you think, because people buy for their own reasons, don't they?
They do. And that's, yeah, I would think that surveying would be one of the most, I mean, I don't know, when I train reps, they're constantly going, well, what's my cadence? What's this? What's that? And I'm like, all you got to do is ask them about themselves, shut up and listen. You know? Yeah. You know, and it's like, use a survey, do whatever you need to do, but make sure that, you know, sales 101 means that you're solving a problem. You and I've talked about that before. You're solving a problem. You're not trying to force somebody into something that is the wrong size shoe or the, you know, and so, yeah, that's cool.
Absolutely. And we see a lot on social media and, you know, within some forms of training where they talk about closing techniques, high ticket closing techniques, all this sort of stuff. And for me, nowadays, it's less and less relevant. That maybe worked in the past, but the buyers now, in my opinion anyway, are more sophisticated. They are looking for a different type of engagement from the reps. And they're looking for a high degree of professionalism, and so they should. Because, you know, again, whether your client is selling a widget or a piece of machinery or whatever it might be, or they're selling a service, the sales journey is more complex. Therefore, it needs a different type of approach. And there's lots of good selling systems out there. Sandler is one I'm familiar with and keen on. Jeb Blunt, who I know you're aware of over in the US, I'm a big advocate of anything he teaches, both in his books and in his sales academy. It's all really good stuff, but it's evolving and continually evolving, and that's the challenge facing companies that have teams of reps, which hopefully we can solve.
Yeah. So, you know, it's as simple as asking and surveying, yet it is so complicated all at the same time because of human nature, is what I'm hearing you say. Because at the same token, because they buy for their reasons, it's kind of almost like you need a divining rod to figure out what the reasons are if you're not going to listen.
100%. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that the way I kind of put it across to the reps that I'm involved with at the moment and have been in the past is it's, you know, when you first start chatting or talking to your potential client, you're actually assuming the mode of a doctor almost, where you're trying to work out what the diagnosis of their problem is. And again, it's about being open and transparent, because your customer will react well to that, and genuinely being interested in you know, where their result is, what works for them. And it in often cases, in fact, I would go as much as to say 70 to 80% of cases, it's not what the rep thinks. And if you don't ask, shut up and listen, you'll never find out. And you see reps, you know, inexperienced reps doing that all the time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think there's a stat in the United States that I'm probably remembering wrong. So please, anybody listening, don't quote me on it, but it's astounding. But, you know, less than 50% of the reps that are in sales should be in sales. and I think it's like 1 in 8 can actually close, or something really, really low. You know, I don't remember where the stat is. I'd have to have it in front of me, but it's a low number. And when you start talking about surveying and listening to the customer, I think that's part of it. But revenue ties into marketing. It ties into more than just a B2B sales team. And in fact, some of them aren't even B2B, don't need a B2B sales team, And so if a lot of times I was interviewing a customer this morning and we were talking just a little bit, can you tell me if my product is even worth being out there? And sometimes it starts there too, so that survey is it's a very important tool, I think, for sure. So Marie, let's talk just a little bit. I introduced you, you have this amazing experience. How did you get kind of from where you are to what you're going to be doing today? And I know you have some great nuggets about that as well. Why are you in this racket?
I think, no, it's a really good question. And I think really when I go back to when I first started in sales, which was probably in my early 20s when I came out of university, and I liked it because it's a people game, and the people game works for me. I like, for example, last year or last 2 years during COVID was tough because, the in-person meetings were all but gone. And okay, yeah, we can do this on Zoom and it's great. And it's broken down boundaries, which I think is fantastic. But still, we are people. And from the point of view of what I did, I started off in corporate finance, leasing for both businesses and individuals. Obviously, then we had our alliance with the Chartered Accountant Institute, which was great. That there's never been a more unlikely sales team than a team of accountants. And I think that's a global thing. I don't think that's just a UK thing. But from that point of view, they're probably the toughest clients you'll ever have, because they're pure logic based, as you know. But once you're connected with a team of accountants, it certainly helps for sure. So really for me, sales was always a people game, and that was what I enjoyed. So it was always a natural fit. And then, of course, as my career progressed, when I was myself and a senior finance director would go into an organization who were having trouble. I would look at operationally, the FD would look at the finances. I used to call them my conscience. And that was how we affected turnaround. And it really is just fundamentals, and everything, irrespective of how complex sales is becoming, lots and lots are not looking at the fundamentals, and it has to start from there for sure. That's certainly what I've found works over here in the UK for sure.
Yeah. Well, you joined the crazy group, the group that they rank themselves as the bottom feeder half the time.
Absolutely.
Try to get head trash out of that. And yeah, I love that it's people. You actually get to interact with people. I even on this podcast, I get so excited about them because I learned so much about people, and it's exciting. So when we talk about exciting, so what do you see in economics or in just the wave of the future? What do you see happening out there, and what are you excited about?
So no, great question. So I think in particular, the thing that I see as exciting going forward is the change that's come across or come upon us so quickly because of the pandemic, the new technologies that are evolving in such a rapid rate, the whole climate agenda, which is global. It's not about UK or US. It's a global agenda. Mm-hmm. And how people are transitioning so quickly. For example, I've got a bit of experience in oil and gas and automotive. And if you look at those two sectors specifically, the innovation that's coming is coming thick and fast. In fact, I was chatting to a client at the weekend. I was up watching a rugby match, and him and I were standing next to each other. We got chatting, and he was talking about the opportunities in wind and wave power. And they're running a project just out of Gran Canaria in the Canary Islands, because I don't know if you know Gran Canaria, but it's very, very windy, and lots of waves. So of course, the Spanish government are supporting and investing in that technology to create power from new sources, and I think that's in so much as it's challenging, it's fantastically interesting. And then the other thing I came across just last week, actually speaking to one of our oil and gas clients in the north of the UK, they were talking about oil and gas is still there and will still be there for a long time, because we do have this tremendous reliance on it. But even within, so for example, some of these big oil rigs are powered by very inefficient means. So oil and gas fired generators, which are as little as 20% efficient. So of course, there again is another opportunity to innovate and find out a solution for that. So I find the innovation really exciting. I think, but it's the pace now that I think has lots of challenges as companies try and keep up. New starts come into the market, need support, need funding. The project we're working on just now is funding for early stage, mid-stage growth businesses within government support, and also upfront funding of research and innovation. So that's a really interesting sector to be in, and represents our future and our offspring's future too, our children's future. So that's a big motivation for me, for sure.
Very interesting. Yes, you and I've had conversations about infrastructure and some of those dialogues, and that is super exciting, because this next generation definitely has some good things that they can hope for sure. And so one of their biggest challenges, though, is, like you said, the funding or the direction. And the job market has changed completely. So how are you dealing with that?
So as you know, both you and I came together over LinkedIn when we started talking about the whole fractional model. So one of the most recent projects I worked on was with a senior recruitment organization, US based, who was assisting C-suite executives to transition into new roles. But even since then, during COVID, they called it the Great Resignation. Now they're talking about the Great Rehire, because the people who resigned are thinking, oops, I think I need a job. So
that's a whole nother podcast. Yes.
Absolutely. We can do that one at another time. You're absolutely right. But it's, but for example, with some of these early stage startups, they can't afford necessarily to fund a six-figure, chief of revenue or chief of sales. So the fractional model works well. It's already gathering momentum here in the UK. I know in the US it's gathering some considerable momentum, and it makes sense. It makes sense to bring in someone who can help steady the ship, put the controls and processes and systems in place, and then hand off and assist with the recruitment of the new head of sales, head of revenue, or sales management, or even individual reps. So the fractional model, in my opinion, works well, because of course it's nothing like the investment of a six-figure head of sales. And of course, I have a client who works in oil and gas at the moment, and he has a great model that supports this, because of course some of the big oil and gas companies have legacy astronomical salaries, and of course the space that they are transitioning into doesn't have the margins that oil and gas does. So they have to look at those costs, and they have to make sure that they're creating their systems around the minimum, or not the minimum, but an affordable level of senior management, middle management, and then of course the guys and the ladies on the at the coalface who are actually making making the sales and making the revenue happen. So the fractional model, in my opinion, works well for that, and I think that's going to evolve more over the coming years for sure.
Yeah. There's two schools of thought with fractional. One, they don't understand what it is at all. They're like, what is fractional?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And number two is, what you mean a full-time equivalent couldn't move the needle faster than you. And so I have found that those are both very interesting questions. And I usually answer people by saying I can give them a definition for fractional. Moving the needle depends on what they can afford and what their talent pool is and who's actually going to do it, right? So that one's a little bit messier. And you've been in finance, so there's times where it's like, I think the guys from Sales QB, Jim from CEO Focus, he runs that, because I'm part of Sales QB for the sales management portion of what I do. But anyways, and he used to say, there's steak and there's steak, right? And a $50 steak is not a $10 steak. And we all know that when we taste it, right? So the question that, the whole theme of a dollar is too much if you don't have it, it kind of boils down more to not what's the price point, but the return on the investment and how fast the return on investment comes back in. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think no, it's a fair comment, but ultimately a good manager manages. He doesn't necessarily get into the weeds, and a good manager there is to lead and help the team to perform at their best. So and that's why, again, in my experience with the fractional model, yes, okay, so in the first months there's maybe a higher level of involvement until the team is working at optimum. But ultimately, you have to focus on execution, because ultimately that's what brings in the dollars. So, and that's down to the team. And as you well know, it can be very variable in terms of when you go into an organization, what's the team like? How do they react to someone new coming in? How is that transition managed? And that comes from the top. That comes from the owner, founder, chief exec, whoever it might be. So of course they need to be on with the model to make it executable. And I think that's where one of the things I like about the double approach that you and I have talked about before, in terms of someone looking at revenue come finance, someone looking at operations. And if the same team are doing that, it does make a difference within the organization for sure. But execution is so important. And again, that's where we come back to the systems, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is. So Murray, what do you like to do for fun? I know a little birdie told me that you went to Andre Rieu the other weekend and you waited a long time to get there, but what else do you like to do?
Well, do you know that? Well, there's the story. So the tickets for that were bought on the 26th of December 2019. So that's probably the longest I've ever bought a ticket and waited for the concert. The concert was fabulous. So I like classical music. I actually like all types of music. I'm big on travel. One of my bucket lists, I haven't been to Vienna yet. I will be hopefully this year. One of my favorite places to be is Barcelona. Number one for the climate, number two for the nightlife, the beach. It's very cosmopolitan, great place to be. And of course, I love tapas too. So travel is probably top of my bucket list, and looking forward to doing that more now we're out of lockdown. I play a bit of golf very badly. Living in Scotland, you have to play golf.
I'd be worse because I'm a tennis player.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go. So I live next to some of the best golf courses in the world in Scotland, which is amazing. And cycling, I like to try and keep fit. Again, I've got a bit of work to do after lockdown to improve that area of things. But we're all the same. You know, that's a global thing for sure. And I've got a big family. I've got 4 kids who at various ages from 14 up to 27. And you know, they're forging their way, and I love to support and help them. And you know, they're all doing good and enjoying the new opportunities that my oldest girl is a designer and extremely talented. My 2 boys are at university, and my smallest girl is just at school. So there's a fair age range there, and that, of course, keeps me busy, as you can probably imagine.
Yes. Definitely.
So tell me, Val, what about you then? So I know your background, you had some background in heavy machinery. I know you're doing the fractional piece at the moment with construction, with PR and so on. So how do you find that in comparison to the heavy machinery industry? That must be a big change.
Well, you know, manufacturing is, you know, it is. They're just, people will say sales is sales, but you know, I'm a big fan of challenger methodology, and selling ideas are 10 times harder than a widget to me because people can see tangible. And so for me, I just think that in sales, period, I've always had what I call ADD. I love, and not really, but you know, and hopefully that wasn't politically incorrect, but you know, at least my attention span is what some people will call a gnat. I'm kidding. I actually am a long distance runner, so my attention span is okay that way. But
absolutely.
Anyways, I love, like you said at the beginning of the show, I love ideas. I love the future. I am a sci-fi geek, and because I'm a sci-fi geek, I like seeing how companies are solving challenges that are making lives better in the future. And I like to see those companies succeed. So yeah, construction, heavy equipment, real estate appraising, tax and accounting, SaaS, actually, and enterprise. I had a recruiter one time say, you don't really have SaaS or enterprise. And it's like, yeah, I didn't really set it out and say SaaS and enterprise on a LinkedIn algorithm. And then, you know, I love the PR company that I'm working with. I'll give them a shout out right now, Johto PR, because they are disruptive in how they do how they do PR. And a lot of times in the revenue process, people forget that PR makes marketing and sales jobs easier.
Of course it does. Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
And they all see it as an expense, and they don't see it as getting the, you know, as KJ says, getting it out there in the court of public opinion, right? And,
absolutely.
Helping them. So yeah, and this construction SaaS company right now, Safe Site Check-in, I've just always believed in the safety of those workers. And with the infrastructure projects going through with these mega cities through 2050, and in you know, physical infrastructure, and then tech and every other type of infrastructure out there, I just find it fascinating, just absolutely fascinating what people are doing to help, you know, the global economy. And also their stories are not much different, whether it's a widget or a service that helps the widget, their stories are not much different, you know. So pretty cool stuff, Murray, pretty cool stuff. So
yeah, no, it really is. And it's as I say, it's the investment in the future and the pace of it that's exciting. But every one of them needs funded. The project we're working on just now is quite exciting in terms of we've actually managed to have a bit of a coup in terms of helping growth businesses forward fund their innovation and then use the support that's available from the governments. And this is not just a UK thing, this is global. But we've managed to get one of our funding partners to stand up and allow that to be funded in advance. And that's quite unique in the space, in that it means that there's investment in innovation that's possible that wouldn't have been possible before.
Yeah.
because typically they'll fund it with maybe VC money or private equity money, and then of course that will be paid back with the grants and support that come from other means. But of course, when you're able to fund it in advance, it makes a whole lot of things, whole lot of more things possible. So that's a project that we're super excited about. We only got the news of that last week.
Oh, good.
And I'm just starting to reach out on LinkedIn to people in my group who are in that sector, in terms of lots of different types of businesses, but a lot of them are in the innovation space. So whether it's games designers, software, engineering organizations, people looking at big infrastructure for example, the EV market over in Europe and the UK. So funding's so crucial for all of that. So that's taking a lot of our time just now, but the doors are opening, so it's all good news.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing because I know, and not very many people know this, but even in the United States, and I'm sure it's similar when you're talking about grants and funding, but even for the revenue teams themselves, a lot of the governments have specific funding set aside for training employees, including sales, that actually pays for part of what you and I and everybody else are doing if it's set up right. In the United States, it's individual states that those governments choose what that's going to be. But it sounds somewhat similar, just grants, period, for innovation and keeping people up to speed. And it brought to mind, I was also in what we called healthcare, kind of the Amazon delivery system of healthcare, but with a middleware platform at one point. And one of I love her to death, to pieces. I always say this. Her name's Gail Lindsay, and she was with Kaiser Permanente. And in the United States, we were going through a sort of shift in fee for service versus value-based healthcare, meaning that you treated the whole body, not just that. So they did a lot of preventative care, and she was with Kaiser Permanente, which is a big organization over here. And she was one of the doctors, and his name, all of a sudden my brain is blank, but she quoted it all the time, is quality of life. Isn't that what we're all in this for? Definitely. And I mean, that's not just healthcare. That's all the things that you have been talking about, right? Different energy sources, different when we talk infrastructure, we're talking about roads and bridges as well as financial infrastructures and all of those things globally. And you're talking about the health and well-being for these companies that are innovative and able to get that funding to help make the global way of life better. Isn't that what we're in it all for, right? I mean, that makes sense.
100%. And it's taken the reset in the last 2 years for people to actually step up and say, well, okay, hold on. So maybe working 12-hour days is not the right way to do. Maybe investing in spending time with the kids. It's interesting over in the UK. There's a big shift happening at the moment, and especially in the big cities. I was following a LinkedIn post this morning, and there was a lady who she took a photograph of her and one of her friends, and they were heading into work on the tube, and they were all just squashed in like sardines. And of course, the dialogue in the LinkedIn feed was interesting because people were challenging that now, where more than 2 years ago we took 12-hour days and rushing in and rushing out and working so hard that really all you can do at the weekend is recover. We took that as a badge of honor, but now people are challenging, especially the younger generation. For example, my kids in their 20s are saying, no, we don't want to do that. We want to go skiing. We want to have a weekend. We're happy to work. And of course, the opportunities that hybrid working has given has, in my opinion, been fantastic, because, you know, dads and mums are getting to see their kids when they're young, and all those key dates, like when they first walk, when they first talk, that days gone by, that was down to the daycare. They were the ones that got that benefit, not necessarily the parents, you know.
Yeah.
So these are big changes that have been brought about, and I think to the positive. How is that coming? How is that working in the US, Val? How are you seeing that?
You know, it always comes with mixed bags with the way that the US rolls, but I mean, I try to take Fridays off because I'm so tired by the end of it, you know, and I think that the companies are trying to help with quality of life more, partially from the cultural shifts from the younger generation, as you mentioned. Pendulums tend to swing one, you know, all the way one way, and then we get kind of in the middle ground for it. But yeah, I don't think anybody sets out going, I want to work myself to death, and then when I retire I just die, right? I mean, that's nobody says that's my goal, that's my 5-year plan, right? So,
yeah, absolutely not.
so, you know, and it's always refreshing, you know, learning from history and then learning from the excitement and the exuberance of youth, right, as what they have to say and how they see things. I mean, they're not creating the computer from scratch anymore, so it's just different now, right? But yeah, now that they already have that basis, they're able, and that's just an example, not completely, but they're able to build on what you have been doing or what those who have gone before. And yeah, their eyes are open. Hey, we want quality of life. You know, we don't want the show on TV that says we worked 50 hours in that 24-hour period. You know,
yeah, I mean, absolutely.
And I know in the past I've done, you know, my full-time equivalents, 17-hour days were definitely there. They were part of my life. And no, I don't want that any more than anybody else, you know, and my employees, I don't want that with anybody either. You know, I want an honest integrity type situation with good effort at work, one you are working. But yeah, no, I think it's very important. And that's where I also feel like the fractional rise helps, because some of these guys, to get up to speed fast enough to help some of these small companies, it will take a toll on a learning curve. You know, one guy told me today, you know, 4 years to get there, you know, where they didn't have 4 years to get there. So it's helpful, but yeah, anyway. But Murray, this has been super exciting. So tell me a little bit of where, if somebody who's listening wants to get a hold of you, one of the places, we'll list all the different places to get a hold of you on the Revenue Maze page and everything else. But what's one place that they can get a hold of you?
Probably LinkedIn's the best for me, Val. So if they search Murray Wilkinson on LinkedIn, I'll come up. And obviously the project I'm working on just now is with these innovation companies in the tax credit space, but that's just a project I'm working on just now. But feel free to reach out and connect on LinkedIn, and we can get into dialogue. And if there's anyone needs any help or thoughts or opinions on what's best to do, what's not to do, I'm not saying I always have the right answers, but I'm certainly happy to try and give some support for sure. So be delighted to connect for sure.
All right. Well, there you have it. Another episode of the Revenue Maze with Murray Wilkinson this time. And it was super fun. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you again, Murray. It was wonderful.
Thanks again, Val. Great to see you.
Thank you all for joining another great episode. For show notes, links, and resources, visit revenuemaze.com. And never forget, you are why.